What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? With opening day just a few days away, who is going to make the D-backs opening day roster? And then there's been a little rumor swirling about Jordan Montgomery to the D-backs, which we'll be bringing down on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? Always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com to see all of my latest work. Opening day is just a few days away. Spring training is wrapping up. D-backs did not have a good performance on Sunday. We'll talk about that later on the podcast, but we are slowly starting to fine-tune the roster and figure out who's going to be on this opening day roster, which we'll talk about all on today's podcast, plus a big rumor that is swirling the Arizona Diamondbacks as well. But before we get into any of all that, thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. We are just a few days away from opening day, but we are still not at 1,000 subscribers just yet. Slowly, but super close to 1,000. So please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's get into the podcast and let's discuss the roster battles as we are approaching opening day. Who looks like they're going to be making the D-backs opening day roster? I first want to start with the bench because the D-backs have made a flurry of moves the last few days to get guys off their roster and start to solidify their roster. I said roster how many times already? You might need to do a drinking game. Take a shot every time I say roster during this podcast. Maybe I gotta say team to switch it up a little bit. But the D-backs made a flurry of moves the last few days. They released longtime Major League shortstop Elvis Andrus. They reassigned Kevin Newman to minor league camp. They sent down Pavin Smith as well. So when you look at who's left in camp for those bench spots, the battle right now for the 3 bench spots for the D-backs as we enter opening day, there's still 4 players in the mix battling for those 3 spots. That is Jake McCarthy, Emmanuel Rivera, Jace Peterson, and Blaze Alexander. And so now we have a very close battle of who should be the backup players for the D-backs. The D-backs have at least toned it down to these few players left in camp. And when going through each of these players and making the case as for whether or not they should make the team, it's very easy for 2 of these players. Jake McCarthy and Blaze Alexander should definitely be bench players for the D-backs. Jake McCarthy is someone who's already been on the D-backs for the last few years. He's someone that we saw have a great season back for the D-backs in 2022, where he was really a breakout star for the D-backs. Yes, he struggled in 2023, but like we've discussed on this podcast, even if Jake McCarthy is not hitting his ceiling as a player at the plate, he can still offer you value, at least as a guy, base runner with his speed on the base pass, still creating chaos. So I think Jake McCarthy still has value to this D-backs team. And there's been reports that he's generating interest as well from around the league. Teams are looking at Jake McCarthy as their 3rd or 4th outfielder. Maybe the D-backs can find themselves a deal like Dominic Fletcher because, to be honest, moving Fletcher to the Chicago White Sox, I think, was a pretty good trade for both teams. The White Sox get a guy who day one, defensively, offensively, can at least look major league ready and might be better than a lot of their other options that they already had internally. He's going to be fighting for an everyday role and looks like he will be getting close to an everyday role in Chicago. So they will be getting a real major leaguer that could start day one in Dominic Fletcher. And then the D-backs got back in return a very intriguing pitching prospect with some upside as a potential starter, or at least a very good high leverage reliever. So I think that Dominic Fletcher trade ended up being a win-win for both sides. And I want to know if the D-backs keep Jake McCarthy on their roster. Maybe he does look pretty good as a bench player, fourth, fifth outfielder, right? Still offers you that value of the speed. And maybe when he does platoon and get his opportunities, if he does look good again, swinging the bat, you can only raise his value from there, and then you can trade Jake McCarthy at a later date. So I think Jake McCarthy has to make the team because he offers value with his speed, and then you can raise his value if you're the D-backs and potentially trade him down the line. So I think he's getting one of those 3 bench spots. I think the other guy, of course, is Blaze Alexander, who has been the star for the D-backs this spring training. He has the best stats of any player this spring training for the D-backs team. His slash line, I don't know if this includes Sunday's game or not. Well, let me see. I totally forgot if he played Sunday. He did. He went 0 for 3. So this is including Sunday's game. Blaze Alexander, I don't know if it's his final spring training stats, but 396, 418, 604. That's his slash line after 24 games in spring training. He's 21 for 53. He's got 4 doubles. He's got 2 triples. He's got a home run. He's got 6 RBIs, 5 stolen bases. Like, Blaze has done everything from an offensive standpoint. You look at his exit velo. He is crushing balls, not just over the fence, but line drives after line drives, getting quality contact on every pitch, it seems. Balls flying off his bat. Defensively, he showed you he's got a hell of an arm. He's making double plays. He's sliding, diving for balls. Like, he showed you offensive and defensively, he should be good. His base running is also good. Like, Blaze Alexander as a guy who's 24, 25 in his mid-20s. Geraldo Perdomo, seemingly a little banged up as we enter the season. Blaze Alexander, I think, has to be on the team. He offers way more upside than the Kevin Newmans, the Elvis Andruses of the world. I think the D-backs have seen that. I think Blaze and Jake McCarthy are 2 locks for 2 of the 3 bench spots. And so that leaves Jace Peterson versus Emmanuel Rivera for the last 2 spots. Emmanuel Rivera out of options, while Jace Peterson is under a guaranteed contract, while the Oakland A's will be paying a majority of his contract. So if you're asking between Jace and Emmanuel Rivera, who are the D-backs going to pick? I think it's going to be Jace Peterson, who's on a guaranteed deal. Rivera out of options, so you would have to DFA him. But Peterson, I think, offers you a little bit more defensive versatility as your backup infielder. I think you could play more spots around the infield. I think he offers you a little bit more value with his base running as well. I don't think either Rivera or Jace Peterson are great options, but just between those two, I think the D-backs would lean Jace. I think he offers just a little bit more value with his legs and a little bit more value with his defensive versatility. So I think the 3 guys who will win the backup bench spots are going to be Jake McCarthy, who we've seen on this D-backs team the last couple of years, Blaze Alexander, the newbie who has taken over spring training by storm, and then finally, I think that last spot will go to Jace Peterson over Emmanuel Rivera, and that would potentially end Manny's time with the D-backs. But I think that's going to be our bench spots for this Arizona Diamondbacks team as we approach opening day. Now I want to talk about who's going to win the number 5 starter job and how the bullpen is shaping up as we approach opening day. And again, maybe take a shot every time I say opening day as well. But before we get to opening day, of course, if you want to place any futures bets on the D-backs to potentially win the World Series in 2024, then the best place to do that, of course, is FanDuel Sportsbook, because say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. My favorite thing to do now that baseball is back in full swing, I like to take a same game parlay with the D-backs and do D-backs money line, Corbin Carroll over on total bases, and give me Ketel Marte RBIs. If those 3 legs pay out at plus 300, I'm putting money down. If you want to put money down, please go to FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and use promo code LOCKEDON. Bet on college hoops until they cut down those nets. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, and let's talk about some more roster battles that have ended or seemingly close to ending as we approach Take a Shot opening day. How about the battle for backup catcher? This one seems to be over as Jose Herrera has been optioned back to AAA. It looks like Tucker Barnhart has won the job for the D-backs at spring training. I think he should have won it. I think he just looked way more comfortable behind the plate this spring training. I think he just looked like a major league veteran, which he is. And offensively, I don't think he's looked bad. There's been games where he swung the bat well or has had good plate discipline and has been able to get on base. I think offensively, he's not a great player, but I do think there's a little bit more in the tank than a Jose Herrera, who is fine, but hasn't really shown much growth defensively for the D-backs. Like, he's average at best in that situation. Tucker Barnhart, I think, is at least an above average backup defensive catcher with decent plate discipline and long-time major league experience. So I understand the D-backs going in the route of Tucker Barnhart, and I think he has looked better this spring training. So correct decision by the D-backs there. Tucker Barnhart will be the D-backs backup catcher on what? Opening day. But how about the battle for the number 5 starter? This is one where it's seemingly still coming down to the wire, but I think from what we've seen recently, I think we all know the direction that this battle is going. It feels like Ryan Nelson is definitely in the lead for this battle. He just continues to look really good this spring training. I mean, he's been racking up the strikeouts. And like we've talked about, Ryan Nelson is not just doing it like how he used to do it, right? In the past, he's just gone fastball heavy. Those secondary, tertiary pitches really weren't that effective. It's something that he struggled with a lot last season and something that he needed to improve on entering this camp. And it's something he has been able to improve on this camp. You've seen him throw way more sliders and way more non-fastballs to hopefully prop up that fastball, right? Not be as fastball reliant. Make sure your secondary and tertiary pitches are way better. Throw those for more strikes so you can set up your put away pitch, which is your fastball. And Ryan Nelson has been able to do that. His most recent start a couple of days ago, I guess 3 days ago, March 22nd, against the Seattle Mariners. 5 innings, 1 earned run, 9 strikeouts. Ryan Nelson has been racking up the Ks this spring training. I think he's definitely in the lead for the number 5 starter. I mean, he has the most innings pitched this spring training of any D-backs pitcher. He's got a 2.66 ERA over 6 games started. 3 home runs allowed, I don't like to see, but 26 strikeouts and 20 innings pitched. He has just been the D-backs best starter this spring training, and so I think he has to win the number 5 starter. Tommy Henry was better in his most recent outing, but you still look at the numbers on the whole this spring training, and they're not looking pretty because of how bad those middle outings were. 17 innings pitched, a 6.88 ERA, 13 earned runs. The 1.71 whip isn't good. The 3.24 average isn't good. Tommy Henry can still start the season potentially as the D-backs long reliever. But I think just from my vibes, I think the D-backs would want to start him in AAA and let him get, consistent starts as a starter down in the minor leagues for the Reno Aces. So I think Ryan Nelson will win the number 5 starter job. And I think Tommy Henry will be sent back down to the minor leagues to get some starts with the Reno Aces. And I'm still not too sure who's going to win that long reliever job for the D-backs, but it definitely seems like Ryan Nelson is locked into that number 5 starter job. He has looked so good for the D-backs in spring training. He pitched the 3rd most innings for the D-backs last year, 144 innings pitched for the D-backs last season. And with how much he's improved this spring training, I'm actually very excited to see how Ryan Nelson looks as we enter opening day. But of course, with Eduardo Rodriguez hurt, the D-backs potentially might need another youngster. So maybe Tommy Henry is still there as the D-backs number 5 starter because we still don't know how long Erod is going to be out. Sounds like he said himself he's like 95% healthy. So maybe he doesn't have to miss a start. Maybe he does. We will see. So maybe Tommy Henry is still there for the first start of the season, or maybe they go with like a bullpen day if they think Erod is only going to miss one start. I don't know exactly how that's going to break down, but it is still something to monitor as we enter opening day. But Ryan Nelson, I think, would definitely be my choice for the number 5 starter right now. And I think that's the way the D-backs are leaning as well. And then how about the bullpen? We've talked a lot about the battle for the 2 lefty spots between Mantiply, Sal Frank, and Kyle Nelson. And it feels like we have our answer because Sal Frank was optioned back to minor league camp, back to AAA. And so now we just have Mantiply and Kyle Nelson, and those seem like they're going to be the 2 lefties for the D-backs in the bullpen. Now, I will say Joe Mantiply does make me a little bit nervous because I don't think he's looked that good in spring training. Again, you never know how much you want to take out of spring training, but Sunday's outing just further illustrated that there is some question marks with Mantiply coming off a year where he struggled mightily in the first half. Yes, he came on strong in the second half of the season, but very up and down 2023 from Mantiply, and I wonder if we're going to see more of 2023 in 2024 because this spring he has not been that good. 6.14 ERA this spring, so potentially could there be Joe Mantiply gets traded or cut by this D-backs team, and then you call back up Sal Frank, and now your 2 lefties are Sal Frank and Kyle Nelson? I think that could be in the realm of possibility, but the D-backs would give it some time before they do, something that drastically. I don't think we're 3 games into the season and the D-backs already DFAing Joe Mantiply. But if he struggles, 2 months in, I could see the D-backs pulling off a maneuver like that. But as it currently stands right now, feel like we're going to opening day with Joe Mantiply as one of the lefties and then Kyle Nelson as the other lefty. He's probably been the D-backs' best lefty this spring training. 6 innings pitched, only 2 earned runs, 182 average allowed. He has looked solid. Those numbers are better than Sal Frank. Those numbers are better than Joe Mantiply. So Kyle Nelson winning one of the bullpen spots is not surprising at all. But Sal Frank, I think, will definitely be called up sooner rather than later. There will be games and series where the D-backs are going to need 3 lefties in the bullpen instead of just 2. And when those situations are called upon, Sal Frank will be the guy that gets the call from the D-backs front office. So this is not the end of Andrew Sal Frank. He will definitely be making appearances with the D-backs going forward. And potentially, if Joe Mantiply struggles, maybe we see more Sal Frank in the future than we even expected. So the D-backs roster is slowly coming together, but it is also becoming crystal clear as there are only a few spots left open on the D-backs active roster for opening day. We've hit on the number 5 starter. We've hit on the bench. We've hit on the bullpen. We've pretty much hit on all of it. But one thing we haven't hit on is this rumor that's swirling around this D-backs team because potentially they might have their Erod replacement, which we'll talk about in the next segment, because I first want to talk to you guys about Amazon Fire TV, because if you're trying to watch D-backs games this season, the best place you might want to go is Amazon Fire TV, because Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On, plus most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game's analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all of the latest in the world of sports. March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. All right. Let's get back into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. And I just want to hit on Sunday's game real quick because I just want to throw Sunday's game in the garbage. Merrill Kelly had his final start this spring training. He did not look good. He gave up 6 earned runs. He gave up 3 home runs. And I think it was just the Brewers' day. I just want to say I am not taking too much out of Sunday's performance. I know Merrill Kelly looked terrible, but Merrill Kelly is still that guy. I'm not going to put too much stock into Sunday's game because I think if he faced the Brewers in the regular season, he would dominate the Brewer crew. But Sunday's performance was definitely not the game I want to see as we enter, the regular season. D-backs end Sunday's game with a record of 13-15. They have not looked that good this spring training. And it's mostly been their offense, I think, has been the most disappointing. Whenever we've seen those lineups where it's like the full complement of D-back stars, where it could be the potential D-backs lineup as we enter opening day, those lineups typically haven't produced for the D-backs this spring training. So what I'm most worried about is probably the D-backs offense just from the performances that we've seen this offseason. But again, it's spring training. You're not going to take too much out of it. Still think the D-backs are, of course, a World Series contender. Just want them to look a little bit better this spring training. But again, when you look at some of the standings from spring training, like the Oakland A's are one of the better teams. So again, not going to take record or anything that seriously when it comes to spring training. But I just wish the D-backs looked a little bit better at times, but that's okay. As we enter opening day, not too worried, just a little bit concerned, more so with the Joe Mansplies of the world who struggled in Sunday's outing and have struggled all spring training and struggled last season. That's the kind of performance and guy that makes me nervous from what I've seen this offseason. But outside that, Sunday's game, we're not going to put too much stock into it, despite the D-backs getting blown out by the Brew Crew. I'm just ready for us to gear up for opening day. Erod might not be there the first, few games of the season, maybe the first couple series as he works his way back from the lat strain. But the D-backs potentially might have a contingency plan in place because there's been a little rumor that the D-backs are potentially thinking about adding World Series pitcher Jordan Montgomery to the rotation. I just want to say, if the D-backs did this maneuver, I would absolutely love this signing. One, I don't think he would break the bank at this point of the offseason. If the D-backs signed Jordan Montgomery, I would imagine it would be like a 2 for 36 with that second year being like an opt-out. Like, I don't think Jordan Montgomery would be expensive at all. So that's one reason why I'm pro it. The other reason is because Jordan Montgomery is just a really good pitcher. And if you tell me my playoff rotation could be Gallen, Kelly, Erod, Montgomery, and then Brandon Pfaadt is your number 5 starter, long reliever out the pen. Like, that is a nasty, nasty rotation. I don't think Jordan Montgomery is like a number 1 starter, but what he showed in the postseason last year, really, really impressive. He pitched like a number 1 starter in the playoffs. He looked really good in that World Series. He struggled in his one start, but for the most part, I thought he was really good in the ALCS against Houston. I thought he had some really big starts overall in that playoff run for the Texas Rangers. You look what he did against Tampa Bay in the wild card. Like, he had some really, really impressive games in the postseason. And if he's going to be your number 3 or number 4 starter for this D-backs team behind a Gallen and Merrill Kelly, right there with an Erod, like, that is a fantastic pickup for the D-backs. Do I think it's likely? Probably not. Jordan Montgomery, when you look at his ERA and the numbers, has gone better each of the last 3 seasons. And I just think that's someone that is probably more of a necessary somewhere else, like the New York Yankees, who just lost Garrett Cole and are still trying to, they're in the World Series of bust mode. Or maybe a team like the Boston Red Sox, who is trying to make their fan base happy and just lost to Lucas Giolito. Or a team like Baltimore Orioles, who just need more high quality pitching depth behind the Corbin Burns of the world. Like, I think those teams need a Jordan Montgomery more. Yes, Erod might miss the start of the season with his lat strain, and replacing him with a Jordan Montgomery and then having both of them in the rotation, I think would be really, really spicy by the D-backs, and I would absolutely love it. But I just don't think the D-backs are going to be overly aggressive in making this move. I would put the percentage of it actually happening very low, just because I don't think they're the team that needs Jordan Montgomery the most. I think there are teams more desperate for his services. And so because of that, I just think the odds of him come to Arizona are super, super low. But again, we don't want to count out Mike Hazen. He has pulled off a bunch of maneuvers this season. And honestly, the last couple years, Mike Hazen has been just cooking as a GM. He's been making a lot of under-the-radar moves or really savvy trades. Like, again, Gabriel Moreno and Lord Gurriel for Dalton Varsho. Major fleece after year one. I do think Varsho is going to have a bounce-back season this year, but Mike Hazen has been a really, really good and savvy GM the last few years, making finesse moves, really pulling off some really smart trades for this D-backs team. So I'm going to ride with Mike Hazen on this situation, whether he picks up Jordan Montgomery or not. I'm not going to be mad at him if he, passes by Jordan Montgomery, because I think another team could swoop in and potentially overpay him. Maybe not too crazy. I don't think he's going to get a 5-year, 6-year deal for $160 million at this point in the year. But could he get overpaid on a 3-year deal with a couple opt-outs? I could see that. But if the D-backs pulled off a move where they got him for a 2-year deal with an opt-out, that would be insane. Odds are low. But if Mike Hazen did pull off a move, lock in the World Series for the D-backs, it would actually make me feel so good about the World Series chances if they got Gallen, Kelly, Erod, and Montgomery. Like, you would have one of the best rotations in Major League Baseball. You already have one of the better rotations in the sport. If you added Montgomery to this mix, you might have the best rotation in the National League, maybe the best in the NL West. Like, it would put you on a different level if you sign Montgomery. I just don't think the D-backs need to make that move. It would be more of a luxury than more of a luxury than a necessity. Yeah, more of a luxury than a necessity. And because of that, I think another team would be more desperate to sign Jordan Montgomery. So odds low. Don't think the D-backs are going to do it, but I think we would all be very happy if the D-backs did pull off or Jordan Montgomery signing. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Deuces.